Ethan had never been one to back down from a challenge, but this was different. He was standing in the middle of the busiest spaceport in the galaxy, watching as aliens of all shapes and sizes hurried past. Humans like him were still a rarity in this part of the universe, but that didn't stop him from holding his own. He was on a mission, a simple one. Really, deliver supplies to the outer colonies and return. Easy. But nothing was ever simple. When you were dealing with alien politics, Ethan navigated through the crowd, carefully avoiding the sharp corners of metal crates and the occasional alien with too many arms. He had a destination in mind, the docking bay where his ship was waiting. The plan was to get there quickly, avoid any unnecessary delays, and leave before the chaos got worse. But then, everything stopped. Ethan didn't notice her at first. She was standing near a vendor's stall, inspecting something that looked like a delicate piece of technology. She was taller than any human woman he had ever seen, and her features were striking, even by alien standards. Her skin was a rich shade of violet, and her eyes, those eyes were a deep gold, like a star just before it burned out. As Ethan walked past, trying to stick to his path, his elbow brushed against hers. It wasn't a big deal, just a momentary contact, barely enough to register, but for some reason, it was enough to set off an explosion of energy in the air between them. The woman turned sharply, her eyes flashing with a dangerous intensity. "Touch me once, and I won't forgive you, human," she said, her voice cold and sharp, like ice scraping against metal. Her words were clear, and they cut through the noise of the spaceport. Like a blade, Ethan froze. The crowd around them continued to bustle, oblivious to the tension now filling the space. But for Ethan, time seemed to slow. He couldn't move. He couldn't speak. He had only meant to walk by. But something about the way she said those words made him feel like he had done something far worse. "I'm sorry," he muttered, not sure what else to say. But even as the words left his mouth, he could feel a shift. It wasn't just about the touch. She was upset, angry, but there was something more in her eyes. Something deeper. The woman didn't say another word. Instead, she simply turned away, her long violet cloak sweeping around her as she stepped forward, vanishing into the crowd. Ethan stood there for a moment longer, still processing what had just happened. It wasn't like him to freeze up. He had dealt with angry people before, some of them much scarier than this alien woman. But her words had shaken him, and he couldn't quite explain why. Shaking off the feeling, he turned to continue his walk. His mind tried to return to the task at hand, but her face kept popping up in his thoughts, her eyes burning with an intensity he couldn't forget. He needed to focus. He was here for a job, not to get caught up in some alien drama. As he approached the docking bay, his ship came into view, a sleek, standard cargo transport designed for efficiency. The ramp was already extended, waiting for him to board. The crew had already finished loading, and everything seemed ready for takeoff. But as he climbed up the ramp, his mind kept drifting back to the woman. Ethan wasn't the type to let things go easily. He often thought too much about moments like these, trying to understand why people acted the way they did. What was it about her that had thrown him off? He paused at the top of the ramp, staring out into the expanse of the spaceport. He could see the woman now, far off in the distance, talking to a few other aliens. She didn't seem to notice him. He wondered if she even remembered the brief exchange. But no, he couldn't keep thinking about her. This was work. He had a mission still. As the ship's engines began to hum, ready to lift off, Ethan couldn't help but feel like something had shifted in the air. A small spark had been lit, and he wasn't sure whether he was the one who had caused it, or if it was the woman. The ship took off, and soon, the bustling spaceport was nothing more than a speck behind him. But in Ethan's mind, that moment stayed with him. Her words, her eyes, the warning she had given him. It didn't make sense. He would find out eventually. But for now, he had to focus on getting to the outer colonies. As the stars streaked past him, Ethan sat back in his seat and let out a long breath. But the image of the alien woman, her eyes, her words lingered like a shadow in his mind. This mission might be more complicated than he had thought. Ethan sat quietly in the cockpit of his ship. As the stars stretched into streaks outside the viewports, his fingers danced over the controls, guiding the ship smoothly through the endless expanse of space. But his mind was not on the navigation or the vast emptiness around him. It kept drifting back to her .zhara. He had tried to shake off the encounter back at the spaceport, but the memory of her words kept replaying in his mind. Touch me once, and I won't forgive you. Human, the harshness in her voice, the icy look in her golden eyes, it all felt like a storm trapped in his thoughts. He couldn't explain why it bothered him so much. He had met countless people during his years as a cargo pilot. He had brushed off rude comments, unpleasant stares, and even dangerous encounters without giving them a second thought. But with her, it was different. The way she had looked at him like he was something beneath her. But also, there was something else there. Was it curiosity? Maybe even a hint of something softer underneath the cold exterior? As much as Ethan wanted to ignore it, the thought wouldn't leave his mind. He had seen many alien species in his travels, but Zara wasn't like anyone he had ever met. Her presence was commanding, yet mysterious. Every glance she had thrown his way made him feel both small and intrigued. He shook his head, trying to refocus. He had a job to do, but in the quiet of space, his thoughts kept coming back to her. And when the communication console beeped, signaling an incoming message, he couldn't help but wonder if it was about her, Captain Ethan. The voice crackled through the speakers. It was the station coordinator, giving him the update on his delivery. Everything is ready on the planet's surface. The colony is expecting the supplies within the next 48 hours. Ethan responded absently, his mind still wandering. Understood. I'll be there in time. He signed off and leaned back in his chair, his eyes half closed as he let his thoughts drift. Again. But then, the unexpected happened. A series of flashing lights appeared on his radar, signaling an incoming vessel. It was an unmarked ship, something small, sleek, and fast. Ethan frowned as he studied the ship's approach. He wasn't expecting any visitors. The ship docked on his freighter, and within minutes, a boarding team came aboard. He opened the hatch to find a familiar face among them. Zhara. His heart skipped a beat. She was dressed in the same regal attire he had seen her in before, her violet skin glowing under the artificial lights. But now, there was no anger in her expression, just a cool professionalism. Ethan felt his pulse race, but he forced himself to stay calm. "What are you doing here?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. His words felt strange in his own mouth. Zara ignored the question and walked past him, her posture straight, as if she were the one in charge. Her crew, a group of well-armed guards, followed her closely, but they kept their distance. She had already shown she didn't need anyone to protect her. "I'm here to oversee the delivery," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Your cargo is important to my people. I'll ensure it reaches the destination in one piece." Ethan narrowed his eyes, confused. This wasn't part of the plan. "I was told I'd be working with someone else." She turned to face him, and for a moment, their eyes locked. Her gaze was still cold, but there was a flicker of something else, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. "I prefer to handle things myself," she said simply, before turning her attention to the cargo bay. Ethan stood there, staring after her. He wasn't sure what to think. He had expected a smooth delivery, but now he had a high-ranking alien princess on board his ship, and she was acting like this was a routine mission. As the ship began its descent toward the planet's surface, Zara didn't seem to care much for the ordinary aspects of their journey. She spent her time reading reports and talking with her guards, never once glancing in Ethan's direction unless it was absolutely necessary. But Ethan couldn't help himself. Every time their paths crossed on the ship, his heart would skip. His thoughts would spiral, and he'd find himself drawn to her in a way he didn't understand. She was cold, distant, and often rude, but there was something captivating about her. Zara had made it clear that she didn't want to be touched, didn't want any human to get too close. But there was a part of Ethan that wondered if there was a reason behind it. Had she been hurt before? Was that why she kept people at a distance? He couldn't get that question out of his head. As the ship neared its destination, Ethan's curiosity about Zara only deepened. He found himself watching her more than he cared to admit, trying to decipher the mystery behind her guarded demeanor. What was she thinking? What was she hiding beneath that icy exterior? The planet below was a rugged, rocky world with little sign of civilization. It was a perfect place for a colony, a place where peace could be brokered and supplies delivered. Without interference, the mission was simple: drop off the cargo, ensure that everything was settled, and leave. But as the ship touched down on the barren surface, Ethan felt a sense of unease. Zara didn't seem worried, though. She stood at the airlock, ready to step out and begin the task at hand. Her guards followed her out without a word. Ethan lingered in the ship's control room, watching her go. The last thing he wanted to do was get involved with her personal struggles. But something inside him told him that this wouldn't be the last time they crossed paths, for reasons he couldn't explain. He couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting with Zara was just the beginning of something far more complicated. And as the door to the ship closed behind him, he took one last look at her. The woman who had warned him with her cold words, the woman who had him feeling like he was walking on thin ice, was about to turn his life upside down. Ethan didn't know it yet, but the journey ahead would change everything. The days on the planet passed in a blur for Ethan. The planet's rugged, barren landscape felt like it was designed to keep outsiders at bay, a place where only the most determined and hardy could survive. The colony he had come to supply was small but thriving. Its people were a mix of aliens and humans, working together to make the best of the harsh conditions. It was the perfect place for someone like Zara, distant, self-assured, and in control. But Ethan couldn't stop thinking about her. He had never met anyone like her before. Zara was unlike any alien princess or royal he had encountered. She held herself with a kind of grace and authority that seemed unshakable. Yet, every time he caught a glimpse of her, something seemed off. Beneath the strong exterior, he could see hints of something fragile. Ethan had been trying to ignore the pull he felt toward her, but it was becoming harder to avoid. She was everywhere on the planet's surface, overseeing the transport of the supplies, barking orders at her guards and the colony's leaders with a voice that made them listen without question. Her presence commanded respect, and even Ethan couldn't help but admire her. But there was more to her than just the icy walls she built around herself. Ethan could see it in the way she interacted with others. She was kind to the colony's children, taking time to speak with them and even sharing a rare smile with the older women who offered her food and drink. There was a softness to her that only a few had ever seen, and Ethan couldn't help but wonder why she hid it so well. One evening, as the sun set over the planet's rocky terrain, Ethan found himself standing alone by the colony's perimeter. The wind picked up, carrying dust and sand across the barren land, but Ethan didn't mind. He wasn't really focused on the planet. His thoughts were elsewhere. A shadow moved beside him, and he turned to find Zara standing a few paces away, her violet skin glowing softly in the fading light. She didn't say anything at first, but Ethan knew she had been watching him. "I didn't expect you to be out here," she said, her voice still as cool as ever. "This planet isn't the most welcoming place." Ethan shrugged, feeling a strange mix of curiosity and apprehension. "I'm used to rough terrain. It gives me time to think." Zara nodded but didn't respond right away. Instead, she gazed out over the horizon, her eyes filled with something unreadable. Ethan wondered what was going through her mind. "It's not easy, is it?" Ethan asked, his voice gentle. "Being in charge of so much, you have to make tough decisions all the time." "I can only imagine the pressure." Zara glanced at him, her gaze sharp but thoughtful. For a moment, she didn't say anything. But then, as if she had decided to share something she hadn't before, she spoke. "You're right," she said quietly. "It's not easy, but it's what I've always known." Her voice softened, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "My people, my family, they expect perfection. They expect me to carry their legacy." She paused, her eyes momentarily drifting toward the ground. And sometimes, I wonder if I'm enough. Ethan stood in silence for a moment, processing her words. It was the first time he had ever heard her speak with such vulnerability. The strong, commanding woman he had seen in the spaceport and during their mission was now revealing a side of herself he hadn't expected. He didn't know what to say. He had never been good with words when it came to matters like this, but he felt something stir inside him, a desire to help, to make her see that she wasn't alone in her struggles. You don't have to carry everything alone, he said quietly. You don't have to be perfect for everyone. You're doing your best, and that's enough. Zara's eyes flicked to his, and for the briefest moment, she seemed surprised by his words. Her usual coldness was gone, replaced by something more genuine, more human. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but before she could, a voice interrupted them. Princess Zara, we've completed the shipment. Everything is ready for transport to the next location. One of her guards appeared from the shadows, holding a datapad. Zara's expression instantly shifted back to the stoic mask she usually wore. She gave Ethan a brief nod before turning her attention to the guard. Good, thank you. As the guard left them, Zara took a step back, distancing herself from Ethan once again. He couldn't help but feel the walls going up between them, just as they always did. You're needed, Ethan said quietly. The people here, they rely on you. Zara looked at him, her eyes searching his face. For a moment, it seemed like she might say something more, but instead, she simply nodded. I know, she said, her voice cold again. I have my duty. And with that, she walked away, her guards following close behind. Ethan watched her leave, feeling a mixture of disappointment and understanding. He knew that Zara's position was complicated. She couldn't afford to show weakness, not in front of her people. But he also knew there was more to her than the princess who always had to be in control. The next few days passed in much the same way. Zara remained focused on her mission, checking every detail, ensuring the supplies were delivered, and that the colony was prepared for the next phase of their work. Ethan helped where he could, but most of the time, he found himself simply observing her from a distance. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something she wasn't telling him. He had seen it in her eyes, the doubt, the fear of failing, but she hid it well. One evening, when the work had been done for the day, Ethan found himself walking along the outskirts of the colony. Deep in thought, he had to make a decision. He had come here to do a job, to deliver the supplies and leave. But the more time he spent with Zara, the more he felt connected to her. There was something in her that called to him, something he couldn't ignore. He didn't know where this would go. He didn't even know if Zara felt the same way. But one thing was certain. He couldn't leave without understanding the woman behind the cold mask. Ethan wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to let her face her burdens alone. The days were growing longer on the planet, and the tension between Zara and Ethan was palpable. They had spent a considerable amount of time together, yet there was still a wall between them, one built by Zara's reluctance to let anyone. And Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that, despite their occasional conversations, she was hiding something deep, something painful. Zara's royal duties were always at the forefront, and Ethan couldn't help but admire her determination. She was always so composed, so certain of herself in front of others. But when it was just the two of them, there were moments, fleeting moments, when he saw a glimpse of vulnerability. Today was different, though Ethan could feel it. The air around them was heavier than usual. There was a mission they had been assigned together, something that would take them further from the colony and into the heart of an unstable region of space. It was a dangerous mission, and Ethan knew it was something Zara took very seriously. He found her standing by the ship's ramp, looking out into the vastness of space. The stars sparkled around them, but her focus was somewhere far beyond them. Her arms were crossed, her shoulders tense. She wasn't her usual cold, controlled self. There was an edge to her presence today, something unspoken. Are you ready? Ethan asked softly as he approached her. Zara turned her head slightly, but didn't meet his eyes. I'm always ready, she replied, her voice steady. But there was a trace of something else in it, a tremor that Ethan couldn't ignore. Ethan stood beside her, his eyes following hers as they both looked into the distance. He didn't know what to say. The silence between them was thick, heavy with the weight of their shared history and the unspoken words that had been building between them. "You don't have to do this alone. You know," Ethan said quietly, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm here, Zara. You don't have to carry all of this by yourself." She stiffened at the words, her body language immediately shutting down. But instead of responding with the usual sharp retort, Zara paused. She let out a long, slow breath, as if she were contemplating something deeply personal. "I wasn't always like this," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wasn't always the one who had to make all the decisions, the one who had to be in control." Ethan turned his head slightly, sensing that this moment was different. This was the first time she had opened up, even just a little, about her past. Zara's gaze was still fixed on the stars, but her eyes were far away. "I had a family, people I loved, a life that didn't involve constant war and politics. But that life, it was taken from me." Her voice faltered for just a second, and Ethan could hear the pain in her words. Without thinking, Ethan stepped closer. He didn't reach out to touch her, not wanting to cross the line she had drawn. But he felt an overwhelming urge to offer her comfort. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked, his voice quiet, understanding. Zara finally turned her head to look at him. Her golden eyes were soft now, no longer filled with the same intensity that had once made Ethan feel like he was being judged. For a brief moment, there was a flicker of something trust, maybe, before it quickly disappeared. Behind the walls she had so carefully built. "I lost everything," she continued, her voice steadying again. "My home, my people, my family, all because of one mistake. One moment of weakness that I couldn't undo." Ethan didn't know what to say. He couldn't imagine what it must have felt like to lose everything she had known, everything she had loved. The weight of her words hung in the air between them. "But I learned," Zara said, her voice growing more certain. "I learned that I couldn't afford to make mistakes anymore. I had to be strong. I had to protect the people I still had, even if it meant pushing everyone else away." Ethan's heart ached for her, but he understood what she meant. He had seen it in her, this need to be perfect, to never show weakness, to always be the one others could rely on. It was a burden, one that weighed her down. "You don't have to be perfect, Zara," Ethan said softly, his words coming from a place of genuine care. "You don't have to be the one who carries everything. It's okay to let people help." Zara's eyes flicked to him, her expression unreadable. She seemed to be weighing his words carefully, as if trying to decide whether she could believe them. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The ship's engines hummed quietly in the background, and the stars continued to shine outside. But in that silence, Ethan could feel the shift between them, the tension, the walls. The distance, they were all still there, but something had changed. Zara took a deep breath and finally spoke again, her voice more determined than before. "I made a promise to my people, to my family. I can't break that promise. I can't let anyone down again." Ethan nodded slowly. He understood. She had made a vow, and no matter how much she might want to lean on him or anyone else, she couldn't shake that responsibility. "I get it," he said quietly. "But remember, you don't have to carry it alone. I'm not asking you to change or to let go of your duty. But don't push everyone away just because you think you have to do it all by yourself." Zara met his gaze then, and for the first time, Ethan saw something shift in her eyes, a crack in the armor she had built around herself. It was brief, but it was there. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. "It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was a start." Without another word, Zara turned and walked toward the ship's ramp. Ethan followed, his thoughts swirling. There was still so much he didn't know about her, so much she hadn't shared. But for the first time, he felt like they were on the same page, like they were starting to understand each other. As the ship's edge closed behind them, Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation, The mission was about to begin. But he also knew that what was beginning to form between them was something much bigger than just a simple task. It was a journey, one that neither of them could predict, and for the first time, Ethan felt like he was ready to take that journey with her. The mission had taken a turn, one Ethan never expected. What was supposed to be a straightforward supply drop had become something much more complex. The situation on the planet had escalated faster than they had anticipated. What had started as a routine delivery now felt like a battleground, with Zara at the center of it all. The colony had faced an unexpected attack from a rival faction, one that had previously been content with their own territory. But something had changed. The rival forces, hungry for power, had decided to make their move, targeting the vulnerable colonies scattered across the outer rim of space. And now, Zara was caught in the middle, torn between her duty to her people and the decision that would define her future. Ethan had seen this change in her. In the beginning, she was the strong, distant figure, always keeping her emotions in check, always focused on the mission. But now, the walls she had built around herself were starting to crack. Every time he looked at her, he could see the stress and the weight of the decision she had to make. It was clear she was fighting an internal battle, one she hadn't let anyone in on. They stood together in the command center of the colony's emergency bunker, the only place that still felt safe. Zara's face was grim as she reviewed the latest reports. The situation was worsening by the hour, and the colony's forces were struggling to keep up. Ethan watched her, feeling the tension in the room grow. It was impossible to ignore. The weight of her responsibility was all-consuming, and yet she was determined to shoulder it alone. "You can't do it all by yourself," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. His words hung in the air, and Zara's gaze snapped to him. For a brief moment, her golden eyes softened, but then they hardened again, and the walls came back up. "I don't have a choice," she replied, her tone colder now. "My people are depending on me. If I fail, everything we've worked for will be lost." Ethan shook his head, taking a step closer. "That's the problem. You're trying to do everything. You don't have to carry all of this alone, Zara. You're not the only one who cares. We can face this together." Zara's lips pressed into a thin line as she stared at him. Her jaw clenched, and Ethan could see the frustration in her posture. He knew that, deep down, she didn't want to feel like she had to do it all by herself. But she was trapped by duty and pride, both of which had shaped her for so long. For a moment, the tension between them was almost unbearable. The sounds of alarms and voices over the comms in the background seemed to fade into the distance. As the two of them stood in the quiet of the room, Zara finally broke the silence. "You don't understand. If I make the wrong choice, I could lose everything. My people, my family, everything I've worked for. This isn't just about me." Ethan understood more than she realized. He had seen it in her eyes, the way she carried the weight of everything on her shoulders. He knew what it felt like to feel like the world was pressing down on you, expecting things that were impossible to give. But he also knew there was another way, a better way. "You don't have to choose between them and yourself," Ethan said quietly, his voice unwavering. "You can find a balance, but you have to trust the people around you. You have to trust me." Zara turned away, looking at the holographic map that displayed the enemy forces. The image flickered for a moment, casting strange shadows across her face. Ethan saw the conflict in her eyes, but she didn't respond right away. "I can't afford to make another mistake," she said finally, her voice quieter than before. "I lost everything once. I won't lose it again." Ethan stepped forward, his expression softening. He understood now. This wasn't just about the colony. It wasn't just about her duty. It was about her fear of failure, the fear of letting down the people she loved and the people she was meant to protect. "You won't fail," he said, his voice firm, but with a hint of reassurance. "You're not alone in this. I'm with you, and I believe in you." Zara's gaze met his, and for the first time in days, she let her guard down completely. The fierce, proud princess who had always stood alone was no longer the same. In that moment, Ethan saw the person beneath the armor, the person who had been hurt, who had suffered, and who feared failure more than anything else. She took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing just a little. "I want to believe that," she whispered. "I really do." Ethan nodded, stepping back as he gave her the space she needed. "Then let's do this together. You don't have to carry this alone, Zara. You never have to." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy with understanding. The two of them had reached a turning point. Zara didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to save everyone on her own. In the end, they were allies, partners. And that was enough. The quiet was broken by the urgent buzz of a comm on the wall. Zara's eyes flicked to the screen, and her expression hardened once again. But this time, Ethan could see a new resolve in her. She was no longer alone in her struggle. Together, they could face whatever came next. "Enemy forces have moved closer to the colony," the voice on the comm stated. "They'll arrive in 2 hours." Zara didn't waste any time. "Get the defenses ready," she ordered, her voice firm. "Prepare the troops. We're not backing down." She turned to Ethan then, her eyes locking with his. For the first time, she didn't look like she was carrying the world on her shoulders. She looked ready to face the battle ahead, not as a lone warrior, but with someone who had her back. "Let's finish this," she said, her voice steady. Ethan smiled, feeling the weight of the moment settle into place. Together, and for the first time since he had met her, Zara allowed herself to believe it. The days leading up to the final confrontation with the enemy forces had been tense. The colony was bracing for impact, and every member of the team, human and alien alike, had been preparing for the worst. Ethan and Zara had spent every moment working together, coordinating their forces, strategizing their next move. The weight of the situation was heavy, but the one thing that had kept Ethan grounded was knowing that he wasn't alone. Zara wasn't alone. The battle that awaited them wasn't just a test of strength. It was a test of trust in each other, trust in their people, and trust in themselves. As they stood in the command center, watching the screens flicker with incoming data, Ethan knew that the outcome of this fight could change everything. "Enemy forces are almost within range," Zara said, her voice calm, though her eyes were sharp with determination. She had taken charge of the battle plans, directing everyone with precision and clarity. Ethan couldn't help but admire how she carried herself, no longer burdened by the weight of perfection, but instead focused on what needed to be done. "Defenses are set," Ethan replied, glancing at the readouts. "We're ready." Zara turned to him, her golden eyes meeting his with a quiet intensity. There was something different about her now, a sense of balance, of peace. The storm inside her had quieted, replaced by the strength of the decision she had made, and the trust she had begun to place in those around her. The princess who once stood alone now stood with a team, one she had allowed herself to trust. "You've been a great help, Ethan," Zara said quietly, her voice softer than usual. "I couldn't have done this without you." Ethan gave a small smile, but there was no arrogance in his response. "We did this together. I couldn't have done it without you." They shared a brief moment, an unspoken understanding passing between them. For all the walls that had once stood between them, they had found a way to break them down. They were no longer two people on separate paths. They were united, ready to face whatever came next. A loud alert broke the silence. "Enemy ships approaching. Inbound at 20 minutes. The voice on the comm announced. Zara stood straighter, her focus narrowing as she turned to the tactical map. "This is it. Get the fighters ready. Prepare the ground forces. We won't let them take this colony." Ethan's heart raced as the adrenaline began to build. He could feel the tension in the air. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was resolve. Zara had inspired that in him and in everyone around them. She had shown them all what it meant to stand strong, not alone, but together. The next few minutes passed in a blur of orders and preparations. The defensive turrets were powered up, the fighter ships launched, and the colony's forces were positioned in strategic locations. Zara moved through it all with the calm precision of a commander who had seen many battles before. But Ethan could still see the quiet weight she carried. She hadn't forgotten what was at stake, what she had to protect as the enemy ships neared. Zara stood by the large viewport, her gaze fixed on the sky outside. Ethan joined her, standing beside her as they both watched the approaching threat. The ships, dark and menacing, filled the space above them, casting long shadows over the colony. "They won't give up," Zara murmured, her voice almost to herself. "But neither will we." Ethan nodded. "They've underestimated us." Zara turned to face him, her eyes serious. "No, they've underestimated you, Ethan. You've shown me that humanity is stronger than they think." Ethan felt a surge of pride at her words. He had known humans were capable of great things, but hearing it from someone like Zara, someone who had seen the power of countless alien civilizations, meant more than anything. It meant they had earned their place in the galaxy, the final. Preparations were made, and Ethan knew that the next few minutes would decide everything. The battle would be fierce, and no one knew exactly how it would unfold. But one thing was certain: they were ready. "Time to finish this," Zara said, her voice steady. Her eyes locked on the horizon. "We're not backing down." The first shots rang out as the enemy fleet entered firing range. The air was filled with the deafening sounds of explosions and the hum of weapons fire. Ethan's heart raced as he watched the chaos unfold, but he remained focused. His role wasn't on the front lines, it was in the control center, ensuring that every part of the plan was executed. Zara's voice came through the comms. "Push them back. Don't let them breach the perimeter." The colony's fighters soared into the sky, engaging the enemy in a flurry of rapid combat. The defensive turrets fired in sync, targeting the enemy ships with precision. Ethan watched the screens, directing the troops, giving real-time updates as the battle raged on. But as the minutes ticked by, it became clear that the enemy was not giving up easily. Their numbers were overwhelming, and for a moment, it seemed like they might break through the defenses. Ethan's pulse quickened, and he could see the stress beginning to show in Zara's face. "Hold your ground," Ethan said through the comm, trying to keep his voice calm despite the pressure. "We're not losing this." Zara's response came through just as steadily. "We won't. We can't." Then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, a new signal came through. The backup forces, humans who had been secretly aligned with the colony, arrived in full force. Reinforcements that no one had expected. The tides began to turn, with renewed strength. Zara led the charge, ordering the final push. The enemy forces faltered, their lines breaking as the combined forces of humans and aliens overwhelmed them. Minutes later, it was over. The enemy had been driven back, their ships retreating into the void. The battle had been won. The colony was safe. Zara stood at the center of the command room, her eyes scanning the reports as they flooded in. Relief washed over her, but there was no celebration. Not yet. Her eyes met Ethan's, and for the first time, she smiled a true smile, one of relief and gratitude. "We did it," she said, her voice quiet but full of meaning. Ethan stepped forward, standing beside her. "We did." Together, Zara looked at him for a long moment, her gaze softer now, no longer the hardened royal who carried the weight of the world. She was someone else now, a leader, yes, but also someone who had allowed herself to trust, to believe that she didn't have to do it all alone. "You've shown me something I never expected." "Ethan," Zara said quietly, "you've shown me that we're stronger when we stand together." Ethan smiled. "I've always believed that." And as the victory was celebrated by the colony, Zara and Ethan stood side by side, knowing that this was just the beginning. The future was uncertain, but they were no longer facing it alone. They were ready for whatever came next.